Hi, my name is Amanda Glass. I am a Georgetown College graduate student. I'm in EDU583, which is ESL Linguistic Theory and Analysis. This is Joy Pickett. She's an ESL teacher in Fayette County Schools. We are going to go over some of the things that I've learned this semester, some suggestions for teaching ESL students, and some various views on how they acquire their language and some recommendations for a specific student that I focused on this year. And so the course actually focuses on linguistic research and human language. But we also go over English grammar as I guess to give us a better understanding of grammar, refresh our grammar before we go on to try to teach other students. Did you have to do that in your studies?
No, that's interesting.
That's something that they said they added because people were having such a hard time when they were trying to teach English because they had already forgotten a lot of those arbitrary rules.
Yeah, or learned it improperly in the first place.
Right.
A lot of the colloquial speech is not proper, so that is interesting.
And it changes, it evolves over time. So now WIDA, I'm sure that's something that you're familiar with. That's something that they've pressed in our classes. So is that something that you all use
a lot? We've used WIDA
like
for quite some time.
And that's just basically the WIDA access scores measure their proficiency in the 4 domains, which is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And the can do descriptors, which I'm going to link to this video, the WIDA Standards and the can do descriptors so that anybody can access those. But those aren't actually rigid. You can look at where your student falls with their scores and see what they can do. And those can do descriptors can also help you to build goals for what they should be able to do at their next level. How have you found that those have helped you in your classroom?
Well, I think they're very helpful from the ELL perspective, because now a lot of times we spend more time with these students interfacing and talking, so it might be easier for us, but it's very helpful for the classroom teacher because I don't spend all day with them. So if you have a student and the teacher will come to you and say, I don't understand why my student is unable to write this paragraph. So you could pull up your WIDA standards, say this is where they fell, now let's look at what they can do. Well, look, that's not where they are on the continuum right now, so you need to be focusing on this and work on this before you can move up to that.
Right.
So I think it's really helpful for the classroom teacher so they know what they're capable of and how to get them to the next level.
And it gives you a guide to scaffold.
It does. See how much scaffolding they need.
Yeah. Well, my student is actually a high school sophomore here in Scott County. She's from El Salvador and she speaks Spanish. We're going to call her Elisa just to save her privacy. But she actually, on her initial WACT assessment score, she received a 2.2 when she first came, and she's only been here a year. And as Joy and I discussed, the access test was done in January, so after 6 months of being here with no prior English instruction, she scored a 3.5, and then she has maintained a GPA of 3.5. Her teacher told me that she works really hard and that she really wants to be a part of America and be able to speak the language, and so she studies her English at night, even though they speak Spanish at home only, but she likes to study her books, she said. Well,
I told you I found it was really exceptional, her scores. In Fayette County, we like to see, the superintendent would like to see a 1 point increase per year. So she has done that and then some. I'm curious, do you have a breakdown of her WAP scores?
No, she didn't give me a breakdown of the scores. She just gave me the overview.
Okay, the composite then. Okay, because I'm just curious as to where her strengths were.
Right, and it seemed like, and this is more common, I guess, with most students, is the listening and the speaking are easier for them than the reading and writing. And whenever I had my conversation with her, she was able to understand me. I think I had a harder time understanding her just because of the dialect, because there is a strong dialect, and we'll show that later, a little excerpt of that. But with speaking, I mean, she seems to be right on point where she's supposed to be based on her score, so they do seem indicative of what she's capable of. Based on her scores, and I just looked at one example on the WIDA Can Do Descriptors, and I was looking at the recounting, and it says that she should be able to identify main ideas from short content related oral presentation, classify examples of genres read aloud, speaking, posing and responding to questions in small group discussions, describing the sequence of processes, cycles, procedures, or events with details. I did not assess her on reading or writing or anything. We just talked. So we'll just focus on what WIDA thinks that Elisa can do based on her scores, and then we can listen to the conversation and see if it sounds like she's right on track, which I think that she is. But you're the one, you've got a lot more experience than I do, so you can tell us what you think. Let's see, and I put that a little farther, I think, for some reason. All right, so let's see what you think.
I'm 16 years old and I'm from El Salvador, but I have lived in the United States like 1 year ago, and I am 16 years old, and I grew up the majority of my life in El Salvador, but the last year I moved to Georgetown, Kentucky, and I am living right now with my parents and my 2 little sisters. And
I'm going to stop it there just because it is a long, a long audio recording. But as you could hear, she was able to socially communicate
Right.
Without using those grammar rules. She was falling back on a lot of old habits from her Spanish language, but she was able to derive content or meaning from the context in the interview that we had. And so I found that really impressive and was able to relate that to what we've been learning in class. What did you notice about her speaking?
Well, I mean, as I shared with you before, I actually did listen to the whole thing at home.
Oh, good.
So I could hear it. I was quite impressed. As she went on, she probably was tiring. There were more errors that became evident. Did you notice that too?
Yes.
But at the beginning, I thought she used some difficult structures and
She
used
was
them properly.
focusing a lot more at the beginning too. She was
Right.
going slower, and then at the end she started to speed up, and I guess she got more comfortable, and it started following.
Breaking down a little bit.
Yeah.
But she still, I mean, I think she definitely is where they want her, if not even a little bit higher. When did you take this?
This was just about a month ago.
Okay, so if she were tested in January and she was at 3.5, that's something we find when you're setting these goals for these kids, and we talked about this a lot. You really need to take into account the time from January until when you tested her. She's acquired a lot more English. And so that's not a pitfall of WIDA, but it is a pitfall. And that's why you said these standards are somewhat fluid, so that is good. She's between a 3 and a 4, but she might at this point actually be closer to a 4 just because of the extra time in an English school.
And then maybe that's what we can try to expect from her to.
Right,
To build
so
her
you
goals.
definitely, now you didn't talk to her about anything that would have anything, it was mainly social instruction, social language from what I heard, correct?
Right, just
Have
to
you had
hear how
other
she spoke.
conversations with her in,
We talked a little bit, not on camera, just about what she's doing and how she's enjoying school and stuff like that. But
so you stuck to that realm then?
yeah,
I'm just curious how she does when you amp up the vocabulary and,
yeah,
when
see,
you
and I
bring
didn't
in
think to do
math
that.
or social studies or science. But if she has a 3.5 GPA, she must be doing well in class too.
And even, I didn't even think about that because I'm a very, I guess, social person, and I like those kinds of topics. So even her written excerpt that I took out was about social.
Well, and they find it easier to do.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I just wondered how she performed when you added some, some CALPs as far as academic language, to
Right.
see how that was.
And that's something that I was actually studying today, was the academic language and how to help them read and write
Mhm.
that, because there's such a difference in just social speech and actually trying to sound professional and intelligent and following all the rules and
Right. And then using the correct vocabulary
For all the
to
different
demonstrate your
content
learning.
areas.
Because she's obviously very intelligent, but it would probably be difficult for her to demonstrate that learning.
Mhm.
And so that would be a language objective for her, should definitely include something like that. I was just curious.
Oh no, that's I would love to find out, honestly. And she said I could come back and sit and watch and
It would be
observe
good to see her
anytime.
in
So
classrooms.
it'd be nice to check her out next year and see how she does after January on her next WIDA access test. And so as we spoke about academic language, the WIDA Standards also combines that, those academic content goals with the language goals to make their standards. So they actually have standards for 5 different areas, for social and instructional language, which is the easiest for them to understand, and then their language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. But WIDA is concerned with academic language. Even though the social aspect is how they start to learn and it's easiest for them, we do need to try to scaffold and help and get them to that next level so that they can produce written and speech in academic language.
And that is the danger. I think if you think sometimes you'll have students that sound good in just general speech, the playground speech, but then in the classroom, the teacher wonders why they're failing. Well, it's because they're missing that part of the puzzle, and you need to provide scaffolding. And again, that's when you pull out your WIDA standards, because they break it down, and it's all available online. They break it down, so you look at where they were, and you can pull up a WIDA standard, a can do descriptor, and that will help the math teacher, the science teacher. It is helpful.
And that's something that, I taught back in 2008, and it's funny how much changes in a short, 9 years, I guess 8 or 9 years, because it was 2009 by the time the class ended, and ESL wasn't that big, we didn't have any professional development on it, nothing, nobody came to our classroom to help our students, and now that I'm learning this, it's apparent to me that all of these strategies would have been helpful for all of my students.
Oh, they are, absolutely. And in fact, you find, because I teach reading recovery, I told you that as well, and we've had many discussions on oral language, and when you have students that aren't accelerating in reading recovery, frequently it's because their oral language is low. And it's the same thing with ELLs. I can tell how fast a child will progress in reading recovery to go through the literacy and get out to be on grade level by their oral language level. So there's a real connection between that, and it's something that even happens at home, because sometimes you have to look into the home to how they speak there, because those students have a hard time accessing, students with low oral language scores, whatever test you give them, have a hard time acquiring the academic language they need to be successful.
Yeah, and that's what I was concerned with about Elisa, because she did speak so well, but they don't speak any English at home. So the only time that she's getting it is at school, and then you have that summer break when she comes back in
The
August.
summer slide.
Yeah, she's gonna probably be speaking Spanish all summer. But judging by the little girl that I met, she may not. She's probably going to continue studying.
I'm sure she will.
Because how focused she was on trying to get there.
And there's also a strong correlation between being very strong in your native language and those skills transferring. So I'm assuming her literacy level in Spanish is quite high too. Do you have any idea?
No, I wasn't given any information on her Spanish literacy.
Because that can be a big clue to you as to, we'll get students from refugee camps that have had very little school experience, period.
Which I do know that she had formal schooling from,
yeah. So she's probably very strong in her native language.
I think she said like 14 years or so, like, so she's been in school her whole life, just in her native language, not. So she's obviously a really smart girl. I mean, to be able to transfer the knowledge that she has of probably the content to the English language that she's learning, to be able to have a 3.5.
Or even to just be able to do her research in Spanish. I mean, there's the internet for a reason. So if she's studying amoebas or whatever in science and she doesn't know what that is, she can Google it and find out and read all about it in Spanish.
And then she can translate it in her,
well, I mean, eventually, you know, when you're reading something that's difficult, that would be content, something scientific, it would be easier to do it in your native language.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then talk about it. I mean, I don't have a problem with kids doing that, and I always tell my students, keep your Spanish up, speak Spanish. It is a great skill to have, trust me, to speak 2 languages.
And that's one of the things that I took from the first class is that if we could get to a point of bilingual education,
true bilingual, right?
It would be the best for everybody because America is lacking in that. In other countries, they're teaching them English from an early age, or you know, they're multilingual or bilingual. And a lot of Americans, we don't start a second language until high school.
And it's a little too late.
Yeah, it's
And then they have-
way too late
they
because
have an
I don't
hour-
speak
they
it
have an hour
fluently,
per
and I've had
day.
4 years.
Yes, it is true.
So it's definitely something that needs to be practiced. So hopefully that'll be something that she'll find opportunities to do this summer. And I know you know about the levels of language proficiency. So we've got her between a 3 and a 4, which is between developing and expanding, which I'm assuming she's probably at the expanding at this point.
I would think she's very close, yes. Looking at what they want, she probably is, yes.
Now, the important concept with linguistics, or one really important concept with linguistics is morphology. And that is basically the study and description of word formation. So that's like inflection, derivation, compounding, or the system of word forming elements and processes in a language. So I found it interesting learning about morphology because we call America the melting pot, you know, and I don't think it started here, you know, because it actually, in Europe, when in our English language and everything over there was created and brought here, it was already a melting pot. It was mostly Germanic, but there are a bunch of different combinations of languages that were used to create the English language. And then when it came over here, it morphed even more, using all of the Old Norse, Danish, Italian, Spanish, German, Dutch, Hebrew, Chinese languages. If you think of all of the immigrants that come to our country, they've all had an effect on how our language has changed over time. And so it's kind of like evolution to me, morphology and evolution. It's like the evolution of a language based on a bunch of various factors. And although we borrow a lot of our words and our language from different languages, there are also different ways that even now new words are being formed. And that's with coining, compound words, acronyms, blends, and deriving words from other words, such as, the first person that thought of the word washing, because they're a wash, or, you can derive the word washing from wash. So if we have a new word, what's a new word that people are saying that you can think of?
Well, I mean, there's lots of new technological words that my son says, I have no idea what these words even mean.
Right,
So
like a GIF, or...
Well, even texting. I mean,
yeah.
15 years
texting
ago,
was
what was
derived
texting?
from the
text
word
was something you read, and you
Mhm.
still do read, but now it's a way of communicating.
That's a perfect example,
So it's
because
interesting. Yeah.
texting wasn't a word until
It wasn't
it
a word
became
like
a
this.
verb.
That's right. In the past,
know?
it was a noun.
Yeah.
You read text.
You read
Now
text.
you text.
And we derived
Mhm.
the verb texting from text. And so that's how language changes over time, and morphology is huge in that.
And that's what makes English so difficult.
Yes. Well, in English, we like to change things up all the time.
We do,
you know,
just to
so-
keep people confused.
Just to confuse everybody so that we can stay on top of things. And then we don't understand our own language.
That's right, that's right. Well, as my dad, he says washing.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy? Now, Dad, it's not washing. Where did you get that? There's no R in there, and he says washing.
Yeah,
Anyways,
that's the
that
dialect.
matched it right there.
My
so.
son's grandmother
says
calls it a
Washington?
wash rag,
Yeah.
and he dies over it. He says, "What is that? I don't even understand that." And then we can, let's see. So basically, now we're to the point of just going over some recommendations to help Elisa and just in general ESL students help their teachers teach more effectively. And something that's really important that a lot of teachers don't think to do, and it's not just with their ESL students, but it's with all of their students, is to get to know them.
Right.
If you get to know how they work and how their brain functions and what makes them tick and what motivates them, then you can better help teach them because you know what they need. And it works the same way with ESL students with learning about their heritage and their culture and their heritage language. A lot of times people look at their heritage and culture and their heritage language as being a deficiency in learning a new language. However, with some languages, it can help them.
It does help them. In
With
Spanish
Spanish
especially,
is
yes.
so close to English. We use a lot of the same symbols.
Mhm.
We use a lot of the same sounds. And so by putting it to the students and to the teachers like that as it being a benefit instead of a deficiency, then maybe we can help them to understand that because they're from another country isn't a bad thing.
No, their second language and their culture is definitely beneficial.
It's something that we can use. It's tools that we can use, and getting to know all of your students is important so that you can use all the tools to meet all of their needs. There are a few links I'm going to put on the underneath of the YouTube video in the comments section. The Oxford Dictionary provides a really clear and concise chart of the English phonemes and the Spanish phonemes. And you can use those to help compare the sounds. And then there are some that, I know there are some sounds that we don't have, some sounds that they don't have. But there are a lot that you could teach your students just by them being synonymous. You know, you may have to change a little bit of the inflection or
But it's
whatever,
similar.
but it's
Yes.
similar
And then
enough.
if you understand when you were talking about the problems, if you know what those problems are as a classroom teacher, it helps you understand, better able to help them. Because there are some sounds, and you've mentioned quite a few of them here. So, and then of course you have the cognates, like the word, my students, their favorite one is embarazada, which of course means, you think it means embarrassed, but in
Yeah.
Spanish it's pregnant.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite one to bring up. You gotta be careful with those because sometimes they're not right.
Yeah. There are some words that sound
Right,
exactly
I'm like, no,
don't
that's
say
right.
here.
Don't say,
Yeah.
You're not that. You're not that.
Just because you know Spanish, don't assume you know. And there are just some different things. You know, there are only 5 vowel sounds in Spanish, so that causes a lot of inaccuracies in their spellings.
And especially the A, E, I, O, U. I mean, the E sounds like A. That confuses them to no end.
Yeah.
So the Spanish, the way they pronounce them, sounds like the way we pronounce another letter in English. So that drives the little ones crazy.
And that was evident in her writing sample. If you looked over that, her spelling was not up to fluency at all. But she did convey her meaning. She did get that across. And just the way that we conjugate our verbs, you know, sometimes our rules are just a little bit different than theirs.
They're
And-
arbitrary often. Like I noticed she said livid instead of lived.
Yeah.
And that ED ending for ELLs just drives them crazy. It drives me crazy too.
Pronounce it. Yeah, I lived in
I can tell
Georgetown.
when the first grade teachers, I can tell when she's introduced that ED can say ed. Because they all come into my room and they start reading look it and like it. And then I've got to bring it back to oral language. Really? Would you say I looked at the teacher or I looked at the teacher? Oh, I looked at the teacher. Well, that's that word. Just because ED can say ed doesn't mean it does. That's just a personal side. You don't have to put that in.
Yeah, I know. That's
ED
okay.
drives me nuts.
Yeah, oh, it does. Well, and they do it every time, though. I mean,
They overgeneralize.
Yeah.
Now it says ed. Oh, look it, like it. Love it. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And these are smart kids.
Yeah. It's a hard habit to break for them.
It is. They're just excited they know that now. So
Yeah.
wish you wouldn't teach it. I almost do.
Now, are you all teaching language through an acquisition view, or are you teaching through a learning view?
Well, I would say Fayette County is probably shifting. They've adopted the Wonders program, which was written, I've already told you about SIOP.
And I brought that book with me too,
Yes.
just in case.
You know, SIOP
the
I mean, it really is, it's good teaching, like you said. Or like I told you, it's really good teaching for anybody. And what I really like about SIOP is the language objectives. Because teachers are really good at coming up with content objectives, but then the kids can't demonstrate their learning because they don't have the language to do it.
Right.
It may be oral, it may be written, it may be both. So if you're intentional about it, it's a lot easier for your students to be able to do that. So we've adopted a new program called Wonders, which was written by one of these authors, Jana, that one. She was involved in writing this. And so they have an ELD, for me, for my students to help them with the text in the classroom. And the classroom teacher set has a language objective as well as a content objective. So I'd say we're moving, and I think that helps them acquire language more than learn language, if that makes sense.
Right. That sounds like the acquisition view, like that program is taking that approach, because it sounds like they're combining the learning of language with the content learning.
Right.
So that you're not just doing the rote memorization and testing. Here's the rules. What are the rules?
No, that's not. But I mean, they do have language objectives, and it is in there. It's just integrated. I would say Fayette County in the past has been kind of hit and miss. This is the first time since 1990 they've adopted something for the entire district and said this is what you're using.
Oh, wow.
So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
It should be interesting.
It's always changing. It's not an exact science.
No.
We haven't figured it out yet. Well, one thing that we've talked about in class is just that with the acquisition view, that the social interaction is really important for students, and having an activity or something to relate or connect the learning of the language to, so they have something to recall later on when they're trying to recall that language out of their schema or their memory bank. And so those activities actually provide them with something to remember that by.
To latch on to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, to scaffold it to in their own minds, because that's what they're doing. We do, I mean, the teachers at my school are big into Kagan, and Kagan does a lot of that, I think. But I think the piece that the teachers have been missing that SIOP adds is just being intentional about it with an actual language objective.
Right, and that's what
If
they've
that
been
makes
teaching
sense.
us,
Yes,
is
you
to
need
have
to
a
be
language
intentional.
objective and a content objective.
Right, and they need to be related, obviously.
Right.
And you need to, I do, we do, you do. You really need to do a lot of modeling, and I think that this helps. The SIOP will help the classroom teachers a lot with that.
And I'll put some information about the SIOP model that she's recommended to me, this book, and then if you could provide me with the information on the other, I can put that in the link as well, the Wonders program. So I think that's all that I have to go over today. I appreciate your help so much.
Well, you're welcome.
And that's it, and I'll see you all next time.
Bye.